There we go.
It's not creepy.
Not at all. And in a couple of days' time, this recording will be put up on our website. In the top right-hand corner of the WRRA website is a link to a YouTube channel. Mark Fairmaid's in the process of updating it to the correct YouTube channel, and that'll happen over the next couple of days. And obviously it'll also go on Facebook and that kind of thing, so everyone can access it and grab the awesome knowledge that Kendra and Bex have. I don't think our two guests need too much of an introduction, but the legendary Bex Mahoney and Kendra Cocksedge. I'll start with Bex. Hopefully all this info is correct. Went to Palmy Girls a few years ago. Represented England at under 20 level. I was quite surprised by that. How'd that come about, Bex?
My mum's English, so went over and did the OE thing, as I think most of us probably do, and just managed to get through the rugby setup there, and yeah, sort of jumped on the curtail of the opportunities, I suppose, that were available at the time. And when I was doing it, women's rugby was fully professional in England, so I left there with a professional contract sitting on the table, which is funny to think about now and what's happened in rugby over the last sort of 2 decades sort of thing. But yeah, sort of the pull of farming in a black jersey lured me back home. But in the meantime, yeah, got the opportunity to play England under 20s, played against Scotland at Murrayfield, which was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, sweet. Then yeah, you picked up 16 caps for the Black Ferns between 04 and 11. As you were just saying, a few of them were on the bench, but you got your opportunity a bit later in life.
Come on, Ken.
One thing I've kind of picked up on is that there's quite a few first fives that seem to move into the refereeing ranks, whether it's yourself, Jacko, Dan Weinger, Tim Cottrell, and a few others. Do you think that's first fives tend to have a good vision or know how the game flows? Do you think that's relatable as a referee?
Yeah, I often just look at it that we sit in a lazy boy chair behind the breakdown and we get a bird's eye view of just about every single ruck and breakdown and tackle because we're very rarely involved in any of them ourselves. So I think we tend to get a pretty good impression of what's happening there. So yeah, and I guess obviously the fact that you can see space and see what's happening in the game, and outside the number 9s, you seem to be the chattiest one on the field. So yeah.
We'll get to
I was just going to ask you that actually. I'm wondering why the halfbacks don't convert into referees. Is there any reason for that? They tend to think they know the game, right?
Yeah, yeah, they tend to sort of head in a different direction, commentating, or just where they can be heard a bit more, I guess. That's probably their direction.
What actually drew you to start refereeing in 2015?
To be fair, I'm not sure really. I guess the priority for me is obviously our business and farming, and what drives me to be successful in farming is probably similar to what drives me to be successful at sport. And I think I'm a box ticker, and I like to tick things off and set new goals for myself. And I went to the 2014 trials for World Cup when Harper was I was still breastfeeding her, and I came away from the trials, which was on the transition of the women's game going professional with 7s, and my heart just wasn't in it, and I just wanted something different. So I got home after the trials, said to the family, I think I'm done with playing, I might have a go at this at reffing. And I think I rang David Walsh. I googled refereeing, ended up on the phone with Walshy, and he put me in the right direction to the Warrbush referees meeting. So yeah, it's just gone from there really.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Yeah, you moved up through the ranks pretty fast. I think you were in the national squad, 2016 you started out there, and on the 7th circuit, and including at the Commonwealth Games. So a fair bit of travel, and would have been enjoyable, but a bit of time away from the farm and the family. Quite hard in that aspect.
Yeah, the transition from playing to reffing was driven around not being away so often and not having to commit so much time to being away from the family and from the farm. Obviously, that has been the complete opposite, the outcome. I'm so grateful for what I've done. It's been an amazing journey. I've met some interesting characters along the way, both challenging people that have challenged me, and I always look at refereeing as head medicine. I know that sounds probably a bit strange to some people, but for me it's an opportunity to get off the farm and look at our business from the outside in, and just refresh myself, I suppose. So I've been extremely lucky with the amount of travelling I've done with refereeing. Sevens World Cup, Commonwealth Games, these are things that I never ever thought would be possible when I first started, obviously in 2015.
Good on you. And I mean, I've listed a few achievements that you've done there. And I mean, for you, how important is to be a role model for female referees, or is it more you'd much rather just be known as the best referee regardless of gender?
I hope that I come across as a pretty laid back country girl, and just the rest comes with it, mate. And if I can inspire my kids and inspire young girls, both in farming, I guess I've gone through and tried to break barriers in farming. It's been a predominantly men's world, and much as refereeing has, and I tend to approach them both the same. When I get to a changing room at rugby, I sort of bowl on in, and if there's guys are having a leak or whatever, I just tend to not draw too much attention to it and just bowl on past and try and find the right people I need. And I've sort of done the same thing in farming. You kind of got to navigate around the corners that put you out of your comfort zone, I suppose. And I tend to think they both go hand in hand with certain aspects, that's for sure.
Cool. And you even came over these ways and did a Harlem Cup fixture last year, Wellington versus Avalon. How'd you find that?
Oh, I absolutely loved it. There's nothing better than, I think, us as referees, players, we just want to meet new people, and that's why we do sport, isn't it? Getting out and about. And my favourite games I've done, club rugby games, Martinborough club rugby semi-final last year. Those are the games that I think stick, because I think this COVID has brought reality back to all of us that we do this because we want to, we do it because we love it, it's our passion, it's our hobby. And if you, if I can get over to Wellington, if I can get to Palmy, if I can travel to Napier and meet new people and be challenged in different ways, then I'm more than happy to jump in the car and go.
No, good attitude. Right. Our next guest, Kendra Cocksedge, started off in the Naki. There was a cute little photo, I think, with a 4-year-old Kenj at Waikato. Came out on social media last week, I think it was. Over 80 games for the Cantabs, all going well. We'll bring up 100 potential next year.
We'll have to wait and
see what happens. I mean, for a start, what took you to Canterbury as a youngster? Was that for uni, or was it other reasons, or?
So it was for university. I managed to get a scholarship at Lincoln University, so that's what kind of drew me to Canterbury. So it's quite interesting coming down on a cricket scholarship. I obviously played rugby as well, and that's the year I had to choose whether I was going to, move on with cricket or rugby, and obviously chose rugby, and super grateful that I've done that.
Yeah, I read that you're in the will play for CD and New Zealand A cricket, so you must have been half decent.
I'd probably say half decent as far as you'd go.
And then you debuted for the Black Ferns 2017, and you've become the second most Black Fern ever with 52 caps. I think it's 53 caps now, isn't it? Yeah. And also our highest test point score of 342. That's pretty impressive. Next year, you've talked about retiring after the World Cup and heading into coaching. Well, why do you want to retire so young, and what's drawing you to coaching?
Well, I haven't fully made a decision on retiring yet, but there's a part of me that thinks, what better way to go than, hopefully win a World Cup on home turf at the top of my game. But I think with coaching, I'm super passionate about it, and I want to give back to the game and to the people coming through and share my knowledge and experiences that I've had. And I really enjoy that side of it, like being a halfback. You're the game drivers of the side, and I'm almost coaching a fair bit now with my club team and even with Canterbury, and I just something that excites me about that. So I'm really keen to get into that. But I guess if that doesn't go well, can always try and become a referee. But I don't know how good I'd be at that. We might need to take some lessons from Bex. But I ran around the field a few times with a whistle, and I do thoroughly enjoy that too, to be honest.
Yeah, it was, I've known you for a few months through work, and as I said to you earlier today, you're not the quietest of people. And I was actually watching a replay of last year's Black Ferns vs England Super Series, and a commentator, a direct quote, Cocksedge is screaming and demanding her forwards to keep going. I think that was quite a good summary, because on the field you are, as you say, you don't often wear the C neck at the end of your name, but as a senior figure in the halfback, you are very vocal and a leader of the pack, so to speak.
Yeah, halfbacks do, they do tend to talk a lot, but I do find myself talking quite a bit. But I also think it's probably helped me, with my game and, talking to the girls and that. There's a line between, the unnecessary chat and then that real directive chat. And, I say to them all the time, they always come up to me and go, man, I love your chat. It's so good. Forwards need to be told where to go and what to do. But it's just making sure as well that I'm, not talking so much that I miss what my 10's saying. That's probably what happened when Bex played outside me. Didn't probably get to it because I probably wasn't listening. I was too busy barking at the forwards. But I think it's a huge quality of a halfback. It's super, super important. And I've had a couple of people come to me and they say, oh man, we've got this awesome halfback, he or she's young and but she won't talk, and I'm like, oh well, that's pretty tough. She's going to need to talk to basically become a halfback. You've got to get that team around the park.
And you've got a pretty impressive award collection. Two most famous is probably obviously the World Player of the Year in 2015 and being breaking barriers and becoming the New Zealand Player of the Year in 2018. How'd you feel receiving those?
Yeah, I'm kind of like a little bit like Bex with the game. I kind of play it, and these awards were just kind of the icing on the cake. It's never something that I set out to do. It just came with it, and I go out and just try and play my best rugby for the team and for the side, and to be awarded those awards over the past few years has been super special. I'm super grateful. But rugby's a team game, and it comes down to the whole team. I couldn't do what I do without my teammates and all the support around me. So I always put it back to the crew for helping me out. But it was pretty amazing feeling to win that Govt Remain, especially when you're up against some All Blacks. It'll be a night that I'll never forget. And same with that 2015 World Player of the Year. That was after the All Blacks had just won the World Cup over in England, and they were there, and it was a pretty special evening as well.
Cool. All right, and now tonight we're here to really talk about how referees and players can interact to get the best out of the game for both parties. This is just a couple of things that I really think about, and is mainly self-awareness, understanding who you are as yourself. And having your own communication style. If I went out there and tried to referee like someone else, it wouldn't work for me. And same with a player, you've got to be yourself. And same with knowing the situation. What message do you need to get across, both as a referee and obviously a player, particularly your game drivers like your nines, as you've mentioned, Kenj, and who needs to be given the message. On this, as I say, everyone's got their own style. Like Nigel Owens is famous for being very jovial and his one-liners and being a great communicator. Where you've got your French, Jerome Garcias and the likes, who are a lot more serious, so to speak. What would you say your style is, Bex?
I think it's key that you kind of what you've said at the top there, understanding and managing yourself. I think it's key that when you go onto a field, you know who you are and you know what you want to be remembered as. And I think the biggest challenges that we have through having different coaches and different styles coaching us is that we need our coaches to remain to the fact that as long as they don't change who we are and who we want to be, then I think you'll grow as a referee, as a player. I think it's really important that we stick to who we are and we stick to those processes, which comes down to the minute that you get out of your vehicle when you get to a game. Don't try and become someone different, because I think that's when the moment that you try and act or create a different type of personality is when you first start to fail in a game of rugby.
Cool. And well, mainly for you, Kenj, or both of you really, would you adapt your own communication style to the game, or do you try and stick true to yourself?
I'll just tap on with what Bex was saying there, and I think, I mean, to be honest with me, like I was pretty horrific with referees when I was a bit younger in the game, and as I was saying, we know halfbacks talk a lot, but I probably, I mean, I'd be the first to admit that my respect for referees when I was a lot younger was horrific, and I've managed to kind of grow and change that. And I think what's awesome having Bex as a referee, and for me, is our relationship that we've had probably in the past, and then now on the field, like, I mean, we have a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke, but then Bex also knows when to, when she needs to be, serious as well, and, will tell me to zip it up, and we kind of have that, awareness and understanding of each other, especially because I'm not the captain. And there are times, and I think it's just that respect that's between both of us that actually helps you have a better relationship.
And that takes a while to build up. I mean, it doesn't happen straight away. Personally, I find if I can go to a practice session or interact with the players outside of a game situation helps as well. Again, you're just building up that rapport and you understand what they're trying to work for and vice versa.
Yeah, and I'd say, like, even just having, it was the same with me and Brit too. Like, we took a while to probably understand each other, and it's probably important is that when you can as a referee is to be able to go back to the club rooms and all those types of things if you can. I know it makes it's a bit harder being by yourself and you're feeling isolated, but the more you get to know the players, and then I think that's hugely important if you can do that.
Because I mean,
we all want the same thing, right? We all want to play rugby and enjoy it.
Yeah. From a referee's perspective, I think there's only about 6 things that we actually need to say by law. It's like your crouch, bind, set, advantage, use it, and advantage over, and everything else is essentially game management. How would you use game management in terms of talking to the players, Bex, to drive positive results in terms of compliance at the ruck, for example, or not getting your penalty count up at 20s and 30s and the likes? Yeah,
I think it starts from identifying who the key players are in the team. And I think for me, I generally try and identify the same positions. However, if I feel if I've got a personality challenge or there's some issues that I find in a relationship with that person, then I'll try and find someone else around there that I can interact with. So for example, in the backs, you might identify the 10 and maybe one of your wingers, or your midfield in terms of your space and making sure players stay on side. And the forwards, generally it's your 7, and in your front row you might pick out one of your props, but you might also just go to your hooker as your. So if you identify those key people, then throughout the game, I find that I'll go to the captain, obviously, for the things that need to be spoken to with the captain. But if I can build a relationship with the 7 and make them aware of that, I can see what they're doing, and that if they've got any issues, they need to sort of have a chat with me and just be transparent, I suppose, be open to the fact that, yes, we are referees, and I guess like Ken said before, we make the final decisions. But if we can try and make the game flow or make the game right for the players, then that's when I love the game best, is when I can let players express themselves and let them challenge me on things that I know I need to be challenged on.
Cool. So in terms of what we both want, or both parties, referee and the players want, like here I've written a few short and sweet things. Respect is a two-way street. As much as we can annoy each other on the field, again, you've got to have that level of respect and keep things above the line, as I'd say. Short and succinct. You don't want drawn out discussions. Clarity essentially comes out of that. To be heard, to me, again, that comes back to that respect, making sure that both parties actually know what's going on and understand each other's perspective. For me, right time, right place, particularly from a referee's perspective, you don't want players coming up to you at every stoppage, at every penalty saying, challenging a decision. And positive outcomes, like you just mentioned, Bex, positive play, express themselves. You don't want negative, slow play. So on that, mainly for you, Bex, do you think it's a good thing to be able to admit you make a mistake during the game, or do you think you can lose credibility by doing so?
No, 100%. And this is my opinion, obviously. If I've made a mistake and it's pretty blatantly clear and obvious, especially a knock on or where you think it's come off one player and you get it wrong, I'm certainly I lead towards the look, sorry if I made a mistake there. And I just think you get so much more respect from players than if you just say, well, no, I'm right. This is the decision. This is what we're sticking with. Yeah, okay, you have to carry on with that process. But I think we're all human, and I think, I want to walk off the field knowing that I've got most of it right. The stuff I've got wrong, sorry, mate. Shake your hand and and then move on from it.
What about yourself, Kens? Do you find players, well, as a referee, I don't find players often know the law that well, and often they won't admit their own mistakes. Do you find it important to do so, or for a start, how well do you think you know the law?
Yeah, and that's a good question. You players, they do tend to think they know the laws, and even for me, like I know that 100% that I don't always have it right, and I really like the approach that Bex has, and I think it's important is to admit if you have got it wrong, because the respect that you're going to get from the players is going to be huge. To be honest, I think I know the laws. Players think they know the laws, but as I said before, referees make the final decision, and that's how the game's played. But over the years, I've even thought a lot around that. I like the idea around the right time, right place. Like, it'd be quite cool to have some education almost around that, to know when to approach a referee and when not to. Because I guess as players, you don't really learn that, or as captains and that at a lower age. At a younger age or coming through. And I think that's hugely important, because you don't want to approach them at the wrong time during a penalty, asking the question of why, and all that stuff. And you only kind of gain that as you go through.
Do either of you think I've missed anything that's really important for a referee or a player that you want out of the interaction?
I think as a player and as a ref, I think it's important that the players know that as a referee we've set a standard. And I think players' biggest frustration is when a referee builds up their pre-match and sets a standard, and this is the process and this is what's going to happen. And then when they get out on the field, they stick to their plan for maybe the first 30 minutes, and then something flicks a switch, I suppose, or they get intimidated a little bit, or there's just pressure that comes on for some reason, or whether it's a time in a game like like you're heading towards a halftime break and I guess your thumb goes off the throttle a little bit. And I think players just want a ref to be consistent throughout the game. And I think if you set a standard and you stick to it pre-match, you need to stick to it for the 80 minutes. And I think as a player, I've found that the biggest frustration with referees, and also as a referee, I know that players find the biggest frustration with me, as I've learned over the years, is, well, you've said that you're doing this and now you're doing that. Is it because you're intimidated by him or her, or what's changed for you?
I think just as a playing in terms of the women's game too, like we get a lot of referees that, you know, kind of rock up and they have the attitude of, oh, you know, this is a women's club match or something, and there's a lot of, you know, they ask you how long you play each way or something, you know, because they might have come from a different age group or something, and I think that straight away is devalues the women's space. And I think you already jump on the back foot and you're like, what the heck, this guy doesn't even know, or this person doesn't even know how long we go each way. And I think it's important as well. There's a lot of mindsets they go and that they've got to coach the girls or the women that are playing as well. Whereas I guess we just want to play, and that's happened a lot at that club level for us.
For me, that comes back to respect. It's a referee or respecting themselves, that a game's a game essentially, and also, male, female, it shouldn't matter. They're there to referee the best they can. And as you say, those kind of comments can put the whole relationship off to a rocky start straight off the bat. So
yeah.
We've kind of touched on this already in terms of pre-match establishing the on-field expectations, and you said, Kenj, that it's a work on essentially around knowing the right time, right place to come up to a referee, and you do learn that over time. But as a referee, for me, the pre-match is all about establishing the on-field expectations, who I want to speak to me, when I want them to, and just keeping it positive essentially. For you, Bex, who do you actually speak to pre-game? Like front row, obviously, captain, but do you speak to 9 and 10, or who do you actually speak to and what message?
I speak to the 9s very briefly and try and get a pretty strong relationship with them straight away. And then I speak to the front row, and I find the front row chat the most, I'm very short and sweet with the front row, because every front row pre-match that you go to, you're dealing with the best props in the world. So every prop is the best prop in the world and understands their position so much better, I think, than anybody else on the field. And so I think when you can go into your pre-match with the front row and you can sell them a great line and sell them a great story of this is exactly how you want it all to go. But often the guys standing there going, yeah, well, I know exactly how this is going to go, and you have no idea how to ref a scrum, like most refs in the world don't know how to ref a scrum. So that's generally the sort of response that I think you get from most props. So my approach to the front row is short and sweet, guys. These are my cadences. Let's see how you go on the first scrum. We'll manage it from there. And whether that's the right or wrong way to approach it, I do that with every game from above Premier Club level. And because I don't think that unless you've done the homework and you're doing a game of a televised game or something where you've got video footage of teams, I don't think you really know how good these front rowers are or aren't. So they're all pumped up, high as and excited pre-match. So I just like to keep it pretty short and sweet, and let the rest happen out on the field. Yeah. Right or wrong, it's just the way that I approach it. I'm pretty laid back around it all, to be fair, pre-match, because I know what it was like as a player. You just go ref, boot check, yeah, whatever, yeah, sweet, okay, when's the ref? Fuck, like let's move on now. And and we know that, most of us know that they don't want us in the changing rooms as much as you probably don't really want to be in there for too long. So you got 80 minutes to work it out with them.
What about you, Kenj? Do you find referees do normally talk to you, or if they don't, is that kind of a respect thing, or how do you interact with referees before a game?
Yeah, I mean, like, as I was saying before, like in the past, I've probably just learnt how to do that a bit better. And I think like Bex just nailed it. Like she always comes in, says hi, gives a short approach, and then you're kind of ready to go because you're in the middle of your warm up. And obviously the information that we're hearing from the referees is hugely important. But I think that's just what we tend to want as players is just we've got 80 minutes, like Bex said, to go out there and to play the game, and you can kind of work through that stuff when you're out there. So I like the short, sharp, sweet approach.
Here for during the match, I've just said follow through, and Bex has already touched on it's around setting standards and maintaining those standards essentially, and also following through exactly what the expectations that you've set out the pre-game, because as soon as a player is coming up to you when you've asked, no, I only want to talk at downtime, for example, it can get you a little bit hot under the collar, or as soon as a referee isn't following through around what they said in terms of cadence, for example, at the scrum, it can upset the players and get both parties out of rhythm.
Look, I think for me, the most critical part, and once again, obviously this is my opinion, the most critical part in general to a game of rugby is the breakdown. And I think that stems from under 15 rugby through to whatever level. If you can get the breakdown ticked off and you can confidently make the right decisions, then I think you're going to get the buy-in from the players and you're going to get the respect from the players. And if you can, and I think it does depend what game you're refereeing as to how much you communicate. Players just want to see the game flow. So obviously Mitre 10 Cup level and upwards, you're going to make different communication standards. You're going to speak differently to players. I believe that's a natural given. But you're refereeing an under 15 kids game and we just want to see the ball out. We just know that kids just want to keep the game flowing. They don't want to hear a whistle. They just want to keep running around and having fun. So the better that we can communicate what we want to see during the game, I don't think it's a bad thing talking to players. As long as you're getting a buy-in from them, they're understanding what you want to see. I think it's important to keep the game flowing. And one of my big things pre-match is I say to the players, I play a strong and long advantage and I'll communicate it to you when it's close to being over. And then I think the halfbacks, Kenj can go, oh sweet, she's going to play a long advantage. I know that I can have a crack. We can try and do something different. We can try and score a try. Whereas I think in the past, especially in the women's game, we've gone, okay, there's an advantage. I'm going to take the penalty. I need a penalty because that's what I want to do. Whereas now we're starting to go, oh, there's an advantage in the women's game. I want to see that I'm going to run with the ball. We're going to try and play this out. And we end up not blowing the whistle so much. The players enjoy not hearing the whistle, and we get a bit more of excitement, I guess, happening around the games.
Yeah. I reckon that's a really good approach. I love being able to have a chat, with the referee. We see a lot as a halfback around breakdown. Yes, we're not always right, but to be able to have a referee that you can actually have a conversation with around a few things, whether you disagree or not, but just listening at times to to what we have to say. And I think Bex, you do that quite well. What I struggle with is, when you're trying to maybe say something about one of the players or something, and the ref just goes, nah, go through your captain. Like straight away, everything has to go through the captain. And I get that at times, 100% agree with that. If you're constantly yapping at them, it totally makes sense. But if it's just one little comment and you haven't said much all game and the ref takes it on board, and whether or not takes it on board but listens, I think that's a really cool way for a player. And then then that respect kind of stays there. Whereas if someone just goes, stop, walk away, and then you're kind of like, oh, okay, and then you kind of almost lose that respect. But I do also understand that at times that needs to happen as well.
Just because I know Gordo's got a session, I'll just skip past the aftermatch. But yeah, as I've said there, honest feedback between players and referees and coaches as well, just around the good, the bad, and the ugly, essentially. This is just the standard communication process that has been released. In terms of currency, to me, it's kind of like banking. You've got a withdrawal and a deposit. If you think your communication is really good, then obviously that's a deposit. If you know you're letting yourself down, that's a withdrawal. And how much currency you've got with the players is how much buy-in, essentially. But just moving through this, we've got a couple examples, video examples shortly, but on the consequence if no change, what's your take on, if you're talking to a captain, Bex, would you say that's too many penalties, the next one's a yellow, or you don't want to kind of back yourself into that corner, you'd say I'd escalate things, or just the behaviour needs to change? What kind of language would you use when you're talking to the captain?
I think it completely depends on the scenario. So I mean, you could have a scenario where it's, you're in the middle of the field and it's early in the game and there's a team that's infringed a couple of times. Then the conversation could be around, you know, you don't want to back yourself into a corner too early in the game, do you? And put too much pressure on yourself as a referee by saying the next one is going to be yellow. Straight away, you put yourself in a pretty blunt situation where you've got no other options other than. But at the same time, I do believe it depends on the scenario. So potentially someone does need to be told, if this happens again, it will be yellow. And I think it's interesting. I was talking to someone the other day about it. And nowadays, we generally tend to put warnings on teams as opposed to on individuals. And I think often individuals will stand out at breakdowns, and we don't identify them as one specific person. We identify that person through the captain. And I just, even for myself, the way that I referee, it'll be something that whether I look to see how I do challenge myself around specifically challenging individuals versus captains and teams. So yeah, I guess it just depends on the scenario. I mean, sometimes you want to say, look, next one's yellow, mate, pull your head in. Alternatively, let's not do this, and let's make sure we get buy-in from you as players. And if we don't, well, they could potentially be going down a different track. So
cool. Well, a question from the floor, John Bellingle. Hey Bex, I'm a big fan of informal communication with key players apart from the captain when time's off. Do you use this technique often, and if so, for what reasons?
Absolutely, 100%. As we approach lineouts, I'll have a chat with the 7 and say, hey, mate, you're a bit early off the last scrum. I just need you to hold. Yeah, sweet as ref, no worries. Or, hey, number 4, just watch your contact in the air at the lineouts. I love preventing penalties. I love preventing the whistle. I love not being the focus of a game. And I think the interaction is, because players love that. Players love to know, hey, I'm being watched, but this person's going to help me out by just telling me what I am not doing right, or what, you know, hey, 13, you're just one step. Take a half a step for me. Get the line back. Yes, ma'am. That's often the one I get. Yes, ma'am. Sorry, miss. But yeah, I think it's really important, and I love rugby, right? So I've grown up from all of us have. We absolutely love the game, and what do I love about it? I love running around and watching players create things, do special things. I love identifying space as a referee and wondering why the hell the first 5 kicked it when they should have run it. All of those things. So I think the more interaction I can have with players, the more I enjoy the game.
I might actually make this slide our last one. These are just a few of the tricks of the trade that I use, or I know a few other referees use. Make sure you use the captain's name instead of red captain, blue captain, for example. It just gets that a bit more of a rapport. Like you've just mentioned, Bex, using downtime to relay trends and messages. Downtime is really crucial for getting the positive comms across. The way I saw it, that's just the technique that I use, because if a player comes up to me saying, oh, you missed this, I can just say, this is what I saw. So they can't come back and say, no, you're wrong, essentially, because it's what I saw. Body language is really important. Within that is eye contact. If you're looking at the floor when you're giving out a yellow card or giving a stern message, then you're not going to get the buy-in from players. And like I've mentioned before, the right time, the right place. All of this applies for both players and coaches, players and referees. But is there anything you use, Kenj, to get a message across to a referee or even your own teammates?
I think Bex has nailed a lot of the, a lot of things tonight around, working with the players, the conversations you have. And like for me, I used to be pretty, almost too straight up and pretty blunt, whereas now it's just, obviously the right time, right place is hugely important. And when you're going to have a quick chat, or it might be at a scrum or something, I'll just say quick something to Bex or to another referee. But like I just tend to limit that limit that now. If I don't have to, I do try and go through my captain as much as possible. But that conversation that you might have, and like I know Bex uses me a lot, as well as a halfback. She might say, "Oh, your backs are offside at the line out," and like, "Oh no, I think she knows." I'll go and tell the crew to watch that, and I think that's a really good technique. I really like that, and I think it's important to keep that relationship with the players. But other than that, I think most of the stuff that Bex has actually said tonight, like, I fully agreed with, and that's probably why she's such a great referee.
Oh, keep talking, mate.
Sorry, mate.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Seriously, like, as a player, like, everything, I was like, man, you nailed it. Like, it's everything you said. I'm like, shit, that's probably why you got such a good relationship with the players, and that's why you're good at what you do.
Thanks, bud. I actually absolutely hate giving out yellow cards, and I take ages to go through the process. Well, I did, to give out yellow cards, and I spent a couple of years on the Sevens series with Paddy O'Brien, and the boys just got to the stage where they're like, in Sevens, obviously it's ruthless, right? Someone's done something, it's pretty black and white, we just throw cards out left, right and centre. And it wasn't until I got on the World Series that I had to like start pulling this yellow card out. And I think even now, like, that photo is certainly not how I was feeling on that day when I was throwing that card out. I was thinking, oh shit, we've got to do it. I've put myself in the corner that if you do this again, 12, then you are going. But now it's a part of rugby. It's not something that we want to do because I think we want a good game, but it's just being confident enough to back yourself, make the decision, and then reassess it after the game.
Oh, no, as I say, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you both very much. Yeah, awesome insight from two professionals, and I'm sure everyone on this call's got a lot out of it, both from yourself, Bex, from the refereeing and the former player side, and Ken from the player side and what you want out of the game. So on behalf of the association, thank you to both Bex and Kenj, and I'll hand over to Gordo to talk about the COVID impacts.
Thanks for having us, Ben, and just thanks to all you referees out there. We can't play the game without you, so keep it up. Yeah,
likewise, mate. Same. Hope everyone's safe and happy in their bubbles and growing their bubbles a bit bigger. And it's been a shit time, but we're all looking forward to getting back out on the field and having a run around with our mates. So all the best for the season, guys.
Thank you very much.
See.
Yeah, thanks, Kendra and Bex. Obviously, if you don't want to listen to the next bit, which is about getting back on the field, please feel free to jump off, but you're more than welcome to stay as well. So I'm going to be just running through my own PowerPoint presentation. I'll share my screen now. So mine's a bit of how refereeing and rugby is going to look like over the next month or so. With COVID-19 and the different alert levels and everything going on there. Firstly, I should say that this is all a bit of a moving feast at the moment. There's a lot of grey areas out there in the guidance that's trickling down from the government and Sport New Zealand's New Zealand Rugby. The guidance that's out there has been inconsistent at times as well. So working out exactly what is and isn't the case is quite tricky, and it's changing on a weekly basis. So to help us, we've got Sport New Zealand have been releasing very helpful guidance, and it's updated on a regular basis. And New Zealand Rugby have started to release their return to play guidelines as well, and I'm expecting there to be another more practical follow-up to the one they've released, which I'll take us through anyway. So I'm expecting a bit more there, but that'll be coming on the way. I guess the main point of all of this is safety, still the number one priority. We shouldn't really be looking for loopholes around how we can get back into training and rugby and things like that. So the New Zealand Rugby Guidelines that were released last week put back, or returning back to the field, into 3 different phases. Phase 1 we're in at the moment, which is prepare to train. The to be confirmed dates for that are 14 May to 25 May. And this period's basically getting the admin side of things right, putting all the necessary health requirements and protocols in place before we can get back to training and playing rugby on the field. And during this period, there's no organised training or games to happen in rugby. And this is just so all of the organisations, including us as an association, can fully understand what the requirements and obligations we're going to have are, and making sure that, you know, the health guidelines and Sport New Zealand guidelines that I'll talk about in a second can all be implemented, and we've had the necessary training around that, or whatever we need to do it. Phase 2, prepare to play. Again, these dates are to be confirmed and subject to us continuing to have good numbers as we go through the various alert levels. So that's 25 May for approximately 4 weeks. All clubs, teams can start training, and that can be contact training as well. Of course, it'll be subject to all of the Sport New Zealand and government health requirements that I'll run through in a second. We can have 1 week of pre-season rugby at this stage, and that's, again, TBC, the 13th of June. So that's pencil a date in the diary. That's the earliest we can get out there for any kind of rugby, will be the 13th of June. And then phase 3 is play. And again, TBC 20 June onwards. I would say it's some sort of shortened season there, but we're good to go hopefully from that date onwards, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to. So I'll just take us through the current Sport New Zealand and government guidelines for a return to sports at alerts level 2. So there's a number of compulsory requirements and then a number of strongly recommended requirements. So the first compulsory requirement is that gatherings are limited to 10 people, no more. And that includes players, spectators, officials, support staff. So fairly difficult to do much except for some small group training at this stage. Although everyone is hopeful that come May the 25th, this will be increased hopefully to at least 50, possibly 100, who knows. And we can get back to something that resembles more like trainings and Monday night meetings. But for now, indoor or outdoor venue, the 10-person gathering applies. They have clarified last Friday that you can have multiple gatherings at one venue, as long as they're all maintaining 2 metre plus physical distancing. There's no interaction or mingling between the groups, and there's no shared equipment. So theoretically, you could have a backs and a forwards training as long as they're completely separate and no more than 10 people per group, which again applies to us as referees. We could theoretically, when we're allowed to, start training and have small groups for sessions on a Monday night. Contact tracing has to be in place. This is the case for any training or games. And what that means is, you've probably seen it when you've been out and about over the last few days. Date, time in and time out where possible, name, address, phone number and email of participants. And that all has to be gathered either physically or electronically. What that means for us, I'll talk about a little bit later, is if it's not going to be done by some sort of app, which I think New Zealand Rugby are investigating, then the team cards become pretty important to make sure they're accurate and reflect who was involved. But I'd like to hope we've got a little bit more detail around how that's going to work coming from New Zealand Rugby at some stage. Regular cleaning of surfaces and equipment doesn't apply to us so much as referees, but that is compulsory for a return to sport, is that equipment and surfaces are cleaned regularly where possible. For us, you know, there's not too much equipment in a rugby game, which is quite helpful. Certainly, I'm expecting the ball to be cleaned before and after games and possibly at half time. But we'll see what happens there. It's more of a requirement for clubs that have more sort of training equipment, such as hit shields, tackle bags, all of that kind of stuff. It's going to be a bit more onerous for them. For us, thankfully, there's not too much equipment we have except for our whistle and things like that, which is ours, and I hope people wouldn't be sharing it with anyone else anyway. And good personal hygiene practices is also going to be a compulsory requirement for everyone back in sports. So that's coughing into your elbow, that kind of stuff, washing hands regularly, and stay at home if sick. So that's all fairly straightforward. Recommended physical distancing, 2 metre plus where possible. That's not always possible in contact sports, obviously, so it's just minimise contact where possible. So if you don't have to have a contact training session, clubs might simply be having touch run-throughs or something similar where contact's minimised. Obviously, there will need to be an element of contact, especially as we get closer and closer to the actual go date for this. At-risk participants might need to take extra precautions. So if you've got an autoimmune disease or asthma or something similar, then you might need to have a think about how all of this is going to apply to you specifically and whether there's some extra precautions you need to take. And shared equipment should be minimised or eliminated completely. Again, not incredibly relevant to us, but certainly is relevant to the clubs and how this is going to work out. So if I'm going to get a bit speculative here and how this all applies to rugby, I'd say it's going to be a lot of admin for firstly the union and the clubs. Clubs are going to have to really actively manage how they train and how we have games on the weekends, especially games, I think, to be honest, because if we've got multiple fields, multiple gatherings, clubs are going to have to actively manage who's there and contact tracing and limits on numbers of people that can be in there. And there's going to have to be some sort of system for clubs to, accurately be able to record who's come to watch a game, who's involved in the game, and make sure that there is social distancing or physical distancing going on there. So that's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of that. Obviously, it's a lot easier at some rugby fields than it is at others. I'm thinking if you take two that are very close to each other, Evans Bay Park only has 2 or 3 entrances, and it would be very easy to man those entrances as a club and keep tabs of who's coming in and their details and the numbers of the gathering. Whereas if you go across the road to Kilbirnie Park, you can get onto the park from anywhere around it, to be honest. So that makes it a lot tougher for a club like PK and how they're going to do things. You might, if you look at a premier game of rugby, for example, you might have the field's roped completely, but you might have a second rope around that for spectators to go in and control the entrances to that. It's going to be a real practical issue for clubs to actively manage. Because I can see as soon as we get club rugby back on the table, there's going to be a huge number of people interested in sport again. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get higher than normal spectator numbers for Saturday sport, no matter what the level is, to be honest. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of obligations on clubs and they'll need the support from the union here. As I mentioned before, balls are going to need to be washed before and after the games. Rugby balls I'm talking about, thanks JB. And possibly at halftime too. We saw those scenes out of Australia and the NRL before they paused, where they were regularly putting balls into some sort of sterile solution and washing them that way. Look, I'm not a health expert, I'm not sure the benefits of doing that, but if that's the advice, then that'll have to happen. Changing rooms, I think, will be a big one. I don't think they're going to be open anytime soon. Possibly in a month's time it might have changed, but it's just too hard to police changing rooms at this stage, especially when you're going to have multiple different gatherings using them throughout the day, and it's a close confine inside the rooms, and there's the risk for people to gather quite closely at entrance points, and things like that, especially the size of some of the showers we've got around our clubs as well. I think changing rooms create a lot more problems at the moment than clubs will be able to deal with. So I wouldn't be surprised if changing rooms aren't open, especially at venues where there are more than one game happening. If there's only one game happening at the venue all day, it's possible you could use the changing room, but that'll be something we'll get some further advice about as well. Club rooms, I know clubs will be very interested in this, and certainly referees who go to the aftermatch would be as well. Yes, they can open, but only if they meet the current health requirements at the time. So what that means is seated, separated, single server, and a gathering limit. So not quite your usual club rooms where you rock in and everyone goes up to the bar and gets beers and stands around and things like that. That's not going to be able to happen under the current requirements. Everyone will have to be seated, stick to the gathering limits, and separated from other tables, and single server who'll come around and take orders. So I can imagine that'll be fairly difficult to work through from a club room's point of view as well. Another interesting point to talk about is spitting. I see New Zealand Football released their guidelines today, and they've completely outlawed spitting, even onto goalkeeper gloves, which I think is done quite often for grip purposes. I understand anecdotally that New Zealand referees refereeing Super Rugby Aotearoa were asked to penalise spitting. Not sure what happened with that, but yeah, certainly that'll be an interesting topic. I think New Zealand Rugby might be asking referees to penalise spitting on the field if we see it, but we'll wait and see what happens there. And teams certainly under no circumstances, and the same goes for us, and especially if we have assistant referees, under no circumstances is there to be any sharing of bottles. So every person on a team will have their own water bottle labelled, I'd imagine. Applied to us as referees. So as I mentioned, changing rooms aren't going to be, or possibly aren't going to be open. It's not too bad for us. A lot of us just rock up at a game, drop our gear, or we're already changed, drop our gear at halfway and get on with it. To be honest, I don't think that it's going to have too much of an impact on us as referees. I can't really see us having to police much of this at all. I think it's more of an issue for the organising club or Wellington Rugby through the organising club as the hosts on the day to make sure that the health requirements are being abided by. But having said that, we've all got our obligations ourselves under the Health and Safety at Work Act as volunteers to look after our own health and safety and make sure that anything we do doesn't impact anyone else. So to have this kind of background knowledge about what the requirements are and what we should be doing, I think is really helpful going forward. Because even if we aren't asked to police or control much of this, it's always helpful to have that knowledge. So no shared equipment for us either. If you're ARing, I imagine that's bring your own flag, don't use someone else's kind of thing. Comms gear will be an interesting one. Most people, if they're using comms gear, will have their own earpiece, but ID and the exec might have to look at those who might be ARing that don't have their own earpiece at this point. And I'm not sure how practical it is to allocate everyone a vest, or those that are likely to be ARing a vest, and have a couple spare just in case we need it. But I'm not sure about that, the practicality, but it could be something worth looking into. Monday meetings, not yet for a while. We've got the 10-person limit until at least the 25th of May, where I hope it raises. But I can't see us gathering as a group before then. And even inside the Workingmen's Club, the gatherings or the gathering limit issue and the number of people allowed inside might also be an issue there. So that's a bit of a wait and see approach depending on what the advice is come 25 May. I think the big one for us, as I mentioned before, is the team sheets. I see a lot of the sporting organisations around Wellington Central region are going towards an app called ID Me, not made by Ian Dallas. I'm wondering if we'll have something similar, if there's going to be some sort of online team sheet for teams to fill out around them, and whether then we'll have to do something as referees, or whether they're just going to simply rely on the team sheet to accurately capture who was there and what times they turned up and similar. I'm waiting to see what New Zealand Rugby's guidance is around that, so I imagine that will answer our question there. So that's how I think it's going to look like going forward. Obviously, there's still a lot of grey areas and questions, and we're not sure how practically things are going to work out. But it is good to start thinking now as individual referees and also as an association, just what our plan is going to be, and how we're going to approach all of this. Hopefully that specific guidance from New Zealand Rugby comes soon, and we have a bit more of an idea about exactly how it's going to look. But I really wouldn't be surprised if it's too similar to that. So unless anyone's got any questions, that's what I've prepared. So fire some questions away in the chat if you need to, or the Q&A function. Scott Mariner, there's nothing stopping us from sorting our own fitness sessions of 10 or less people, maybe in our own level groups. Is that correct? At this stage, under New Zealand Rugby, we're in phase 1, prepare to train. So there's no organised training that can take place between now and the 25th of May, but nothing stopping you and a few mates going down to the park and running a training session. I think that's fine, and hopefully from the 25th of May we could organise some specific level organised trainings at that point. And I think we would be probably wise to start looking at that as well. Good question, Scott. Anything else? Zinni, so no showers, all players will walk into the club room smelly and sweaty. Look, I think if we're at the point where we still have no showers, I think we might be at the point where the club rooms are going to be a little bit of an issue as well. But possibly if the changing rooms are closed, then the club rooms might also be closed. We'll have to wait and see what the gathering limit is increased to. But if it's not up to 50, then changing rooms and club rooms aren't really viable. But yeah, if the changing rooms are closed and you still want to open the club rooms and you think you can meet all the criteria around opening the club rooms, then yeah, you might have some smelly rugby players in there. Good question, Cole. Haven't had any official guidance from Wellington Rugby around what they're going to do. You would have possibly seen recently that the National Top 4 competition has been canned for this year. The New Zealand Rugby guidance is that these apply to all rugby. So there's nothing theoretically that we know of at this point stopping all grades of rugby going live from June the 20th. How grades actually start, including schoolboy rugby, is something for college sports and Wellington Rugby to sort out. I imagine it'll be a bit of a flow down effect. So once we've got the practical guidance from New Zealand Rugby, then college sport and Wellington Rugby can start working out how exactly and what grades are going to start and when. But there's nothing stopping all grades going live on the 20th of June, so long as all the health requirements and criteria that I've said can be met safely. Right. Well, that's it. Thanks everyone for attending tonight. Kendra and Bex's session was great. I thought there was some real gold dust in there around how to set your standards and maintain your standards and also how to be a little bit adaptable within those as well. We don't want to come across as just really grouchy. There is that flexibility in there for us to, show that we are a person as well as a referee, while effectively communicating what we need to see and appropriately maintaining the boundaries between us and players. So I thought that was a really good session. Thank you very much to Ben van Berkel for setting this all up. I think it's good that we continue to stay connected with each other and with the association over this period. And we'll have to start thinking about doing some more physical training over the next month or so before we get into rugby. I don't know if anyone saw it, Bowden Barrett ran a 4-minute 12 Bronco today. So obviously the players are going to be super fit when they get out there. So we'll have to make sure that we're similar. But yeah, if anyone's got any other questions, just give me a buzz at any stage, and I'm more than happy to answer any of them. I've been running a series of webinars on this topic, more widely looking at all sports rather than just rugby, for Sport Wellington over the last few weeks. So I'm well versed in the changing guidelines that we get on a weekly basis. But yeah, again, thanks to Ben for teeing this up and for the Zoom resources. Thanks to the association for supporting us through this. And so, yeah, have a good night, everyone, and we'll talk in a fortnight, I think. or is it next week? I can't remember.
At the moment, Gordo, we're looking at running a session next week. Mike Fraser is going to get a fitness trainer in just to talk through some options for our members to get them back into peak physical condition for the season kickoff. Some further details will flow through later in the week with the Zoom invite and who Mike's going to bring along to that.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for attending. Enjoy the rest of your night and hopefully see you soon.